Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and in today's video we have a fun little restoration on a toy that I've never seen before and I've never worked on before, so it's going to be an interesting fix because I've got to make some bits from scratch. It's missing a part from its face and it's missing one of its fists. Now what is it? Well, it is the Big Dai-X from a Japanese TV show called X-Bomber, or if you're in the rest of the world you may know it as Starfleet. Now quite recently on the channel I've seen that I built a model kit of the Big Dai-X, which is this one you see here on the left, and every time I go to Japan I try and find myself a toy from the X-Bomber series, but they're normally ridiculously expensive. Well, on the last trip I found this little chap and he was only about £12. I thought, well, even in a poor condition like he is, he's missing a part of his face, as I say, he's missing one of his fists. I thought it was well worth getting, and today we're going to try and fix him up. We're going to try and make a replacement little X there, and we're going to do something to make this missing fist. So let's get on with the project. So what is this toy? Well, as I say, this is from a TV show called X-Bomber, which is a sort of puppet sort of sci-fi show that was released in the 80s in Japan. It was later then sort of modified and made to work in the Western world and became Starfleet. There was a cover of the theme tune done by Brian May, and it's a really nice show. It's a really interesting sort of combination of puppets and giant robots going around fighting, and this is the Big Dai-X from the show. And as I say, this is a Japanese toy. I don't know a huge amount about it. In fact, I've been trying to do some research on it. I think this is made by a company called Takatoku, but it could also be made by a company called Dynamic Planning. The information on the back of it is not clear, and I found a few images online which has sort of given me as much information as I can. It's part plastic and part die cast and splits into three pieces, because in the show the giant robot splits into three. So we've got this little head, which is going to be one of the little spaceships. We have his sort of body section, which is going to turn into another of the spaceships, and then we have his legs, which sort of fold up and they form the third of the spaceships. It is a weird looking thing, but it's a great show, and I remember really enjoying watching it as a child. So as soon as I saw this for £12, I thought I've got to get that, even though it's missing pieces. And the plan is today we are going to try and get this looking really nice. I'm not going to do a full restoration on it. There's a few chips on the paintwork. That doesn't bother me. The problem I have is that it's missing a fist, so it looks very strange like that, and it should have this big X on his face. If I bring in the model kit one, you can see that is how his face should look, and without it it's a little bit strange looking. So we need to sort that out. And that's where the internet comes in, because with a bit of searching I've managed to find some pictures of it, and so this is what it should look like. And you can see here clearly there should be an X on the front. I've even found a close-up image of that, and so from this I'm hoping that we can make something to fit on the front of it. We can work out some measurements, we can see roughly how big this is, and we can cut something out of some styrene and see what we can do. These are the best images I have of the toy, so we can sort of go from there. You can see that the X is slightly small at the top and a little bit longer at the bottom, and it's about the same width as the head. So yeah, let's just take some measurements. I've got a bit of 1mm thick styrene, and I will get drawing on that and see if we can roughly make this shape. I'm going to make the X part, and then these little bits on the end I can make out of some brown styrene rod. But yeah, let's do some measuring first and see what we can draw up. Okay, as you can see, with only a few minutes cutting, I've managed to make something that's going to sort of work, I think. This is just a little V-shaped piece. That's one side of it. I can now trace this back onto the 1mm styrene sheet, and I'll cut the other side, and then we can actually start sort of piecing this together and seeing if it looks about the right size. But I think that's not going to be too bad. It's looking pretty good. It may be a slightly bit too tall, but we can easily cut these posts down. And as I say, I'm going to stick the little sort of round pieces on the end, just using some other styrene sheets. So let's cut another one of these, a mirror image, and see what it looks like. I just used a small amount of plastic weld to join those two pieces together, and I've done a little bit more shaping off camera, and you can see that's really going to fit very nicely. It's about the right shape. I think there's just about enough space for his head to fit onto his body. If we actually just put that head back on there, because you don't want the X to be sort of bashing on the bottom. Oh, actually it is a little bit long. You can see that I need to just trim down those bottom pieces, and then we need to make the little sort of bits that go on the end, the little cylindrical pieces. And what I've done is I've found this, which is, I think it's about a 2mm diameter bit of styrene rod, and I've already started cutting some very tiny pieces out of it and rounding the ends of them. These are about the limit of what I can sculpt and shape, so you can see we can stick those on the end. So that's what we're going to do next. I'm going to trim down these end pieces just a little bit more, and then we'll stick some of these styrene rod pieces on the ends to make the X, and then it really is going to start looking like that one. Right, and here we go. Well, it's not quite right, and here we go, because this is actually the one I was working on. When I finally got it finished, I just wasn't happy with the shape. The angles on it just didn't look quite right, so I've quickly remade it, and this one is looking a whole lot better. So if I put this on the front now, you can see that really does line up quite nicely, and it matches the images that I have of the front of this Dai-X face. Now we've got to work out a way of attaching it, and on the front, just where the nose should be, there is a tiny little post, and I'm guessing that the original little X had a hole on the back of it that you could then just sort of clip on there, and maybe it was glued on. So we need to make something that can just fit over that. I have another piece of styrene rod, which is this one, which is just about big enough, I think, to fit on there. So what I'm going to do is very carefully drill a hole in the end, and then I'm going to sort of shape it and do a little angle so that we can plastic weld that onto the back of there. And I have a new tool which I picked up in Japan. I've actually shown you building this recently. This is a little handy drill, so it's an electric powered drill. There's a couple of batteries in there, and you can drill very neat holes with it. So I'm just going to use that to drill a hole in the end, and then we can modify this piece of styrene and stick it in place. But this is really useful for drilling things like this. Right, there we go. So you can see I've got a hole in the end of that. I just need to shape it slightly because we're going to be sticking it onto this, which has got a slight angle to it. So if I just trim off just a little bit of this and put it at a slight angle. I think something possibly like that. Might have to sand that a bit, that might be a bit too steep. I think that probably will do. Is that going to fit in there? Oh yeah, that's perfect. We can now also try this on here because that little hole should fit on the little post there, which it does. That is pretty good. Okay, so what I've got to do is just cut a small slice of this end piece off with the hole in it, and then we'll plastic weld that onto there, and that part is then pretty much done apart from painting. But I'm very happy with how this has turned out. That's now had time to stick in place, and we can do a test fit onto the figure. Let's pop that on. It should stay on reasonably well. I will glue it in the end, but for now we can just sort of push fit that on. Yeah, and that's not looking too bad at all. Actually, I'm very happy with how that's turned out. It's not a perfect match to the original. There's a few little discrepancies, but I'm basing this off just a couple of small photos. So overall, I'm very happy with how that looks. If I bring in my model kit of the Dai-X, you can see that's pretty close. The angles on this model kit are much steeper than the ones on the toy. The toy is a much sort of more simplified version, but that looks really good. And by the time that is painted silver or sort of chromed, it's going to look really nice. It just makes such a big difference to the look of this figure. Now we need to deal with the missing fist. And actually, as soon as I saw this figure and I saw the fist, I knew I had something very similar in a spares bag. Years and years ago, it must be about 10 years ago now, I found some parts for a toy, and I have no idea what toy it was, but one of the pieces was a fist. And here it is. This is a tiny little blue fist. I always thought it was something to do with the Transformers, but it's not. I have no idea what this fist is from. But as you can see, it's a pretty close match in size, and I reckon if we do a little modification to that and paint it silver, it will work really pretty well as a sort of placeholder fist. I very much doubt I'm ever going to find the missing fist or the missing X, so a placeholder version will probably live in this toy forevermore. So we're going to do a few little modifications to this to make it work. These are supposed to be missile firing fists. If you press that button, it's supposed to fire out, although it doesn't really, it gets caught in place. But if I pull that one out, you can see we have a post on the back of it, and I've already started making my own version of that. So again, a couple of other sort of bits of styrene rod. I've started to make something that is just about the right size. I really would like it to lock in place. It may be that I don't get that to work. There is a spring in there, so every time you push this in, it's sort of popping it out again. I'm going to try and cut this sort of little lip at the end so that it actually does lock in place. Then we can chop this off, and I will chop the original post on this fist off, and we'll sort of glue that all together. And then everything will need a bit of a paint. So yeah, let's just do a few more modifications on this and see if I can actually get this to lock in place. If I can't, I'm going to sort of simplify this and just cut a piece of this post that I can just pop in that hole there. But we'll see if we can actually get this to lock in first. So let's give it a go. After a fair bit of filing and a little bit more sanding and gluing, I've managed to make this. The end needed to be built up a little bit, so what I did was just dropped a little bit of super glue on there and then put that into some baking soda to build it up, and I've sanded it down. And as you can see, I've got this little sort of pip at the end, and it does actually work. So if I drop this into the arm and press the button, it locks in place. It's really a pretty good fit. It doesn't fire out particularly well, but then the other one on the other side doesn't fire out, but you can see it does move. So that is going to be the basis of our hand. What I've got to do now is just chop that end piece off so that we've got that little bit there. I'm going to modify this hand by chopping that post off and then gluing those two together, which will be glued with a bit of super glue. And there we'll have the replacement hand, which I think is going to look really very nice. By the time that's painted silver, it's a slightly different shape, as you can see, but I think the overall effect is going to be very pleasing. So let's do these final little modifications and we'll put it all together. So first up, let's trim off this post here on the hand. That's pretty tough plastic. Going to need to sand that down. Then I'll do the same to the piece I've made, and we'll super glue everything together. I could sort of pin this as well, but as I'm not intending to put much force onto this, I think just some super glue will work. It's only going to be sort of pushed in place for display purposes. Now with those two pieces in place, you can see it's looking a whole lot better, but we still need to sort out the paint. So I'm going to quickly take these out into my garage and give them a coat of a gloss finish paint. I've actually just got a gloss white, which will do the job, because the chrome that I want to paint onto it is some stuff called Stuart Semple Mirror, and that works best on a gloss base. It doesn't need to be a black gloss, it can be any sort of gloss, and we will get a nice shiny finish. So just a quick coat of gloss onto these two pieces, and then we'll get it looking quite shiny. You can see the chrome was worn on this one. I'm not going to be repairing the chrome, I just want to leave the original pieces as original, but these pieces need to look sort of nice and shiny. So let's do a gloss coat, and then we'll get out the chrome paint and get those finished off, and we'll also glue that X in place finally. But yeah, I'm really happy with how this is looking. It's going to look absolutely fantastic once it's on display. I've now given these a quick coat, so that is just some gloss white spray paint. You can see it's got a little bit of a shine to it, and that will really help this chrome paint. And this is the paint I'm using. It's called Mirror by Stuart Semple. It's quite expensive. A little pot like this is about £30, but it goes an incredibly long way, and you can apply it with a brush. So we're just going to give this a quick shake up. I'll apply a thin coat to both of these pieces and then let it dry for about an hour, and then we should be able to put everything back together. The chrome paint is now dry, and as you can see, it's looking really very nice and shiny. We can now go ahead and start putting these pieces back onto the toy. For the X piece at the top, let me just remove the post that I used for painting. I want to lightly glue this on. I mean, really lightly glue this on. So what I'm going to do is just get a tiny bit of super glue and drop it in the hole on the back of the piece that I've made, just with a pin. So this is one of my pin tools. I'm going to put a very small amount of super glue in there, and then we can push it onto the toy. That way, if I do ever find one, I can swap it out. But as I say, I don't actually expect to find one of these, but it's just that sort of wishful thinking on my part. So let's put a tiny amount of super glue just on there, and I can get a small amount on my pin here and just put that around the inside of there. And I'll put a little bit on his nose as well, just there. Then we can stick this together. I'll just let that set. That's looking very nice. And here we go, the glue has now had time to dry, and my Dai-X from X-Bomber or Starfleet is now ready for display, and I'm really happy with how this has turned out. The X on the face is a key part of the look of this figure, so without it he just doesn't look right. And as soon as I saw this in the shop, I knew that it would be something that I could work out a way of making. And as you can see, some 1mm thick styrene, I've actually been able to make something that looks pretty reasonable. And that fist was just a lucky find. I knew I had a sort of odd fist and some odd pieces from toys, and it just happens that that was pretty much the same size. So with a little bit of a sort of handmade post to actually fit it into the toy, I've got something that actually matches pretty reasonably. Obviously, if you study this toy, you can see that these are two different fists, but at a glance you can see that's really pretty hard to spot, and it's certainly going to look great when it's on display, because I very much doubt anyone has actually got one of these in their collection. So if anyone comes to see my room of toys, they're going to be hard pushed to spot that this has had any fixes done to it, because they won't have any sort of reference to go on. And that's often the way I like to fix toys. It doesn't have to be perfect. There's a certain amount of wabi-sabi in all of my collection, but as long as it looks nice and it's sort of fit for display, that's good enough for me. And that's exactly what I've managed to do with this Dai-X. So hopefully you have enjoyed this video. If you have, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And if you've really enjoyed it, then why not think about supporting the channel by becoming a Patreon or YouTube channel member. You get early access to all of my restoration videos, and also access to an exclusive series called On the Cutting Mat, where I show projects that you won't see anywhere else on this channel. So have a think about that, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Toy-Polloi. Subscribe for more great videos.